In the Alchemi-Culture philosophy, there are 7 polar aspects of humanity that we need to look at if we hope to transform ourselves and the world around us. These are cosmology and philosophy, law and justice, economics and currency, citizenship and social dynamics, agriculture and ecology, science and technology, and healing and medicine. In this podcast, we're going to talk about these topics. We're going to expose ideas that can help inspire an alchemical transformation of our culture, one listener at a time. Hey there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Alchemi-Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Phoenix Aurelius, and today we are joined by Aubrey Bamdad, one of my very favorite individuals to chat with. Definitely a very good friend and a colleague for many years now. Better part of a decade, I think it is. I think I came down in 2014, stayed with y'all at Yakumaman, and here we are, 2024 already. So you guys have probably ended up seeing...
Happy anniversary to us.
Yeah, exactly. To us. Let's see. You guys probably saw Aubrey on one of our former episodes. We were talking about Egyptian mysteries and all sorts of stuff. And when we created this season, I said, let's get Aubrey back on the show. We don't necessarily have too many scripted things to talk about or a directed interview, but we do have a conversation. Those always tend to be pretty useful and thought-provoking. So we figured we'd just go ahead and open it up that way. So Aubrey, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Phoenix. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Anytime I get to chat with you, it's a pleasure.
Likewise. I mean, just for everyone's knowledge, like Fee and I just had like a bunch of laughs for like half an hour before we hit record. So I'd say we're pretty oiled, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty well in the zone.
You know what I've been thinking, Fee? Is
What?
don't you agree it's an art to thrive in an apocalypse?
Hey, that's a really relevant question actually right now. And yes, it's an art. Some of it is a gift. I'm realizing, like, some people like
Yes.
Nori just have this impeccable ability to kind of stay out of their head initially anyway, and so it becomes even less of an art because you're not tempering anything. You're just sailing through, going with the flow. And I think that is really beautiful and just like an innate gift almost of personality. Wasn't one that I was gifted with.
You know what comes to mind actually is a lot of that can be affected by a mother on her fetus during pregnancy actually.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
absolutely true.
yeah, so her mother may have like had a really, in Ayurvedic medicine, for example, like they talk about how like the most important thing is that the mother is happy during pregnancy because the state of mind and the energetic field of the mother is going to influence completely the well-being, the nervous system, the base, like for example, just think about it from like an endocrinological point of view, right? So like if
Yeah.
you're burning so much like cortisol into your blood and like dumping that into your bloodstream and you're pregnant, and that's like the sauce that the fetus is like gestating in, is that not going to affect the baseline to which the nervous system then calibrates to? I mean,
Well, this is absolutely fantastic. The reason I've had this little smirk on my face the whole time while you're talking is because I was literally just on a podcast. I was being interviewed yesterday morning at the same time, and this guy named Simeon from the Library of Gnosis podcast ended up asking me something very similar about psychopaths and sociopaths. And he was talking about, there are things when these kids are born where we can actually take a look at their brains when they're infantile or toddlers, and we can see that they have certain characteristics just in brain development that create the proclivity for psychopath and sociopath behavior. And he's like, how do you take a look at that from your perspective? And I said the exact same thing we're talking about right now, is that it actually goes back to being in utero and what mom was feeling and also what
what
grandma
she
was
was
feeling.
exposed to, exactly, and like what she was exposed to sensorially, like
Yeah.
was there fighting in the house, was she watching violent programming, what kinds of foods was she consuming, what kinds of company did she keep? I mean, all of that plays into it. It's so interesting because I feel like this is a great segue into what I thought would be really fun for us to unpack today, which is around like our understanding of and experience with quantum healing. Both of us
Oh
have
yeah.
been practicing as alternative clinicians for a long period of time. And so this is something, Phoenix, I have contemplated as you the nature of health and the nature of disease for a really long time, having worked with
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of people over the years and worked on different pathologies on all the levels. And so, like, for example, in Ayurvedic medicine, we have a concept that we call samprapti. And samprapti is essentially disease pathogenesis. Like, there is a process. It doesn't just happen like this. It's not a
Right.
random thing. Anytime we have any kind of pathological symptom on any level, it's because there has been the variables of that perfect storm brewing for a point in time, for a period of time. This is not just like, oh, that's bad luck that happened. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
say it, but like, it's not from a medical perspective, and maybe not all systems. Like, for example, as you and I both know, in my opinion, all true systems of medicine are fundamentally elemental and qualitative in nature. We're
Yeah, me
talking
too.
about TCM, Ayurveda, Unani medicine, Greek medicine as a result thereof,
Oh,
Egyptian medicine. What else? Like, what other systems are qualitatively based? I mean, the
well,
only
even Spagyria, the way the Paracelsus talked about it.
yeah, alchemy. And so, or like any kind of traditional folkloric indigenous form of
That's what I was
medicines,
also going to say. Where you're at, we
of
take a look at
course.
Vegetalista, or we take a look at, any of the different types of systems. They almost always have an elemental type of basis to them, qualitative.
Qualitative. So the thing about that is that, we currently are, and, the medical profession is currently under a different kind of ideology because,
Quantitative, almost entirely.
I mean, I would say you probably agree with me, like ever since the advent of Rockefeller's industrial medical complex, we, have adopted a kind of like Cartesian worldview to medicine where everything is super reductive and super compartmentalized, and this is not related to this, and this specialist has no idea why this, system would be communicating with this system, and this over here doesn't have an
And
effect on this
limited
over here.
entirely to Newtonian physics too.
Yes, yes,
Action
it's
reaction.
all based, yes, and it's all based on the physical. And so coming back to the theory of samprapti, like what my teacher used to tell me is that when something, my mentor who taught me Ayurvedic medicine, is like when
Right.
something manifests on the physical level, that is the last level that it has to manifest on, meaning that has been brewing under the
Yeah.
surface for a long period of time, and that it is considered in the ancient texts that once it manifests on the physical level, it is the most difficult to heal and to reverse. And so that means we all need to have agency to know enough about the inner processes to see when things are starting, when those like elements are starting to come together, and how can we intervene at that point in time before it's like a full-blown hurricane or something.
Yeah, totally. Interesting choice of words. But yeah, absolutely. I think that coming at it from uh a Western perspective initially was kind of my entry into this, but I got started when I was 18 years old. I read a book by Richard Gerber, MD, called Vibrational Medicine. And he basically did that same thing, but he was taking a look at things on a multidimensional level and saying that in his take, he says there's a physical dimension, there's an emotional dimension, a mental dimension, and a spiritual dimension. I would, based on my own alchemical and Kabbalistic background, I've changed that to physical, astral, causal, spiritual. But the divisions of the way that we kind of talk about it and what exists in those dimensions are more or less the same. But he would say the same
Correct.
thing, that things happen in the more subtle dimensions first and create dissonance from a more energetic
They affect
perspective.
the train. It's
And yeah,
affecting a train,
exactly.
an internal train.
And so, like, if anything, like, let's say that there's an astral imbalance, that astral imbalance shuts off the electromagnetic flow or piezoelectric flow to a particular area. And now the organ systems, tissues, cells, etc., that are used to that particular amount of electricity or electromagnetic energy suddenly are cut off, and it doesn't entrain the
Creates a
cells how to
weakness.
behave properly. And same thing, like from a causal perspective too. And this is where we work with like IDF things, is in training the causal coding. It's like the binary coding that even tells electromagnetism what its parameters are, how big its field is, what frequency and wavelengths does it need to operate within, and so on and so forth. All of those types of things get shut down from a pre-formative level. It's not even electromagnetic at that point. It's totally pre-formative. And so, and then same thing with spiritual. It's like if you cut off your connection to being fed by the source through whatever it is that helps you feel that connection more, then all these
All
things
the tributaries and sub tributaries are going to feel the effect of not having that nourishment.
precisely. And so it ends up originating in disease. And
Correct.
Paracelsus talked about something very, very similar, but he said that there is really like the spiritual body and the physical body, and that everything that we do derives its energy from the spiritual. Everything that we are derives itself from the spiritual, because that is the actual source. So, you know, I think that no matter what system of medicine you're taking a look at, if people have sat with things for long enough and sat with these ideas and really examined the nature of disease for long enough, they all come to very similar conclusions, possibly using different terminology, possibly using slightly different bits of perception about the way that those subtle energy dynamics work. Like, for instance, if we take the nadis of the Ayurvedic system that, you know, ride out and derive from the chakras in the astral body there, and we compare that to the meridian system, there's not a one-to-one.
No,
you
right.
know, but
Exactly. We have to take off our literalist cap, basically, and
exactly, and we have
understand that it doesn't translate exactly. But
exactly
there is some crossover for sure between
there
the
are,
meridian
yeah,
system and the system of Marmani.
yeah, which is true also when we take a look at fascial planes too. Like there are crossovers between both of those. If we take a look at the way fascial planes run and the way that energy can run with fascial intersections and a number of other,
Yes.
there's a decent amount of crossover. So,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
not one to one.
ultimately, like take any of these systems of channels, right? So like using the metaphor of rivers,
Hmm.
tributaries, subtributaries, streams. It's basically information, and the way Ayurveda looks at it is that the senses themselves are the gatekeepers or the doorways that mediate the information that comes in and out between the macrocosmic reality and the microcosmic reflection of the macrocosm, right? Which is the individual. And so that's why pratyahara, or the fifth branch of Patanjali system of yoga, which is the right use of senses, is
Mm.
extremely important, especially in this day and age. People think that they can just like worry about what they eat. I'll give you an example, right? So like in this milieu that, I've been in for a long time in traditional Amazonian medicine and vegetalismo and working with people with dietas, every time after a dieta, somebody wants to know, so what should I eat and not eat? And I'm so bored by this question. I'm sorry to offend anyone out there. But
Yeah.
honestly, like I've been asked this so many hundreds of times. And the thing is, it's like you have to look at it beyond what you put, like eating is what you put in your mouth. It's about what you're eating through all your senses. And so when you're doing a process like a dieta that is like having an energetic recalibration, then you have to be really attuned and aware about like the information, not just, I mean, definitely in that experience, but in general, and especially because we live in a world where our attention is the most important resource that exists right now. And so it's so important to steward the attention with how we engage the senses and the kind of information and the modulation thereof that is coming through the senses into these subtle channels, and that affect every single level, like you said, from the electromagnetic to the most physical, gross level, right? And so, I think about, for example, like what the Hermeticists talk about, like all is mind, the universe
Yeah.
is mental, right? And so, or we say like mind over matter, but really it's rather that matter follows mind,
There
And
you
like
go. Yeah.
when you think about it, it's like the Greeks had this word, they called it nous, Nous was like the divine mind or the cosmic mind. But in reality, the way that everything is set up, it's like the above below principle, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's basically, there's a template here that we've been given. And it's holonic in nature, it's fractal in nature, and it basically shows us how manifest reality creates itself and how it perpetuates itself. From like the biggest to the smallest, it's all going to follow the same blueprint. And so ultimately, what we need to do is we need to learn to read this. We need to learn to interpret this. And then eventually, when we get skilled enough, we need to learn to be a provocateur of this so we can work that energy how we would like it to. Yeah. But here's the thing, and we touched on this a little bit in our last podcast. The thing is, what I've learned at least, and it's just, this is my humble opinion from being in the field, other people may have other perspectives, is that, studying this kind of template, patterns are just naturally going to emerge. And so what needs to happen, at least through my own experience, what I've learned is that we have to learn how to align ourselves, our minds, our thoughts, how we direct ourselves energetically to macro cycles and macro patterns. We need to observe these patterns, and then we need to align to them. We can't fight against them. So in order to do that, we have to check our personal agenda at the door. A lot of people are not okay with that, Fee. A lot of people are going to fight tooth and nail because they want what they want, And
well,
so
that kind of goes against everything that the reptilian cortex of the brain tells us to do as well. It's like, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of it. And we have to override that at a certain point based on context, and especially if we want to evolve as a human individual.
Are you one of our listeners that struggle with odd health symptoms like anxiety, brain fog, poor sleep, headaches, hormone dysregulation, gut dysbiosis, joint muscle pain, autoimmune conditions, or any other host of seemingly unrelated symptoms? If so, listen up, because this is for you. I want you to start checking out the Dr. Pompa Cellular Detox Program. It's a program that I recommend to people who write into my business inquiring about health recommendations, because my own IDF wellness research waitlist is several years long, so I love having this trusted and effective cell detox program that I can refer people to. This program addresses the root causes of most people's health struggles, which come down usually to toxins and cell inflammation. Now, while the program is an investment in terms of both time and money, if you're seriously struggling with your health and you're at a dead end, this is probably the answer that you've been looking for. If you check our affiliate link attached to this episode in the description below, you'll be taken to a clickbait type style webinar. And yeah, I know I personally detest that style of marketing too, but I have vetted Dr. Pompa and his program for many, many years, and I feel really good about what they have to offer. As many of you know, I'm only affiliated with companies that I myself stand behind 100%. So if this speaks to you, I recommend sitting through that webinar and then following the steps to become enrolled in their program if it feels right for you. By using our affiliate link, you help the podcast and our research academy. Thanks so much.
and push the species, the evolutionary, needle of the species forward a little bit. I don't know about you, but like I know you think about, we think about these kind of things, it's not just about like small us and our small lives. It's about like pushing the whole evolutionary needle forward a little bit, and
Exactly.
we do that one drop in the ocean at a time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So it's funny, I've been thinking a lot. I think a lot often about these things from like the Egyptian perspective, and how reality is both cyclical and adheres to these patterns. And that, like, for example, in like the Heliopolitan mystery schools, there was a kind of a doctrine for this. It was called the Osirian line. And so it was like anyone studying like, Pythagoras or Plato or any of these guys that studied in the Heliopolitan mystery schools, some of the fundamental core teachings that were taught had to do with like learning the laws of this heliocentric reality, because you can't go against the laws that everything was created by. nor would you want to, because it's just going to make everything difficult. So what are the laws? So for example, and this is the core of alchemy, solve et coagula. So, things are born, things live, and then they die. And then sometimes they're regenerated,
Yeah.
and it's like on every single level, from the biggest to the smallest, from like galaxies to cells, and on every level, from the most gross and dense to the most subtle and causal, it follows these laws, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you can see it. You can actually take a look at that. I mean, just take some sort of body, whether that's a plant body, an animal body, mineral body, or whatever, and put it into an environment that is ideal for its decomposition. And as soon as you do that, you will find that something else is made out of that. In the case of a metal, you get a mineral, right? Instead of a calcium metal, now all of a
Totally.
sudden, maybe you have calcium carbonate because the carbon helped to decompose the metal in order to create that carbon thing. Or, we
Right.
see this with tons of different things, but we see tons of life actually feeding off of and taking their energy from the death of one other thing in order to form itself or themselves. And so if that happens on the physical, it makes perfect sense that these types of dynamics happen on more subtle dimensions as well.
It's a template.
Yeah.
Learn the guides, like read the guides. That's the thing. It's like, and I think what we're talking about right now is extremely relevant. And so if there's anyone listening that's trying to like understand what's the relevance of what we're talking about, okay, I think like here we are on planet Earth currently, where there are a lot of shifts and changes that are currently happening. And I think that you'd have to be living very deep in the back of a cave or under a very heavy rock if you haven't realized that there's a lot of shifts and changes that are currently occurring right now on the planet, and pretty much no one is immune to any of that, And so, for example, like how to ride the waves, how to learn to read the weather patterns, how to learn to read the tides, yeah? Like that's going to be critical for all of us that want to thrive in the apocalypse, yes?
I think those things are still perennial, whether there's weather modification or not. You know
Yes,
what
agreed.
I mean?
100%.
Speaking of that, have you ever looked into any of the works of he's an author named Tristan Gooley?
No, should I check him out?
Oh my God. If you want to do any of those things that you just talked about with like outstanding precision and like common sense that our ancestors would have easily had.
Can you put the link in
Yeah.
yeah, when you finally post this? That's good.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
Tristan Gooley's work, he teaches you how to be able to read weather, how to be able to understand messages that are in water, how to be able to read
Yes.
the landscape just by, very, very basic things that, once you learn to look at it like that, it's like, oh yeah, those things are obvious. But yeah, as a filter,
Phoenix, I think living in the Amazon, I've naturally just learned that a lot from just being in nature and being in the environment. It's very, like, I'll give you an example. This morning I was in my meditation practice and I could feel in my practice, eyes closed, I'm working on a breathing technique, and I can feel so palpably the precipitation rising, and I'm like, it's gonna, and there it is, and there's the rain. Yeah.
yeah,
So like we can feel that. I think it's wonderful that people have done more research on this, but we are all designed to feel that because we are a part of this blueprint that I was talking about, and everything reflects everything else. That's the holonic fractal nature of all of this. So the more we just sit with ourselves, the more we sit with nature with no agenda, not trying to figure anything out, things just come over time. Like just as an example, like the above and below principle, like how does that manifest? It manifests in every single thing. But like, for example, like we're seeing a lot of disturbances in the different like spheres of the atmosphere, and the different
absolutely.
spheres of the biosphere, like how much of that is like artificially is due to artificial interference. Like that is a conversation that's starting to meme currently. That's interesting. I think some people are like, oh, there's no research for that or whatever. I don't think that's true. I think we need to be open to all possibilities at this point in time, without necessarily like jumping on any kind
Yeah.
of bandwagon. I think we need to be open because this is just a different world and a different game that is emerging. And so we just have to be open to all the possibilities of what could unfold and what is unfolding. And so, for example, you have like the layers of the earth, essentially. You have like the layers of Earth's body, which are like the geosphere or the lithosphere, and then the hydrosphere and the atmosphere. And then you have like the layers of Earth's like kind of energetic body, like the troposphere and the stratosphere and mesosphere, thermosphere, and like all of that. And so like we were talking about, and then like you were saying with this book that you got your hands on, in a very formative stage of your life, that was talking about like the three bodies. I mean, and Vedic or elemental medicine or like Eastern philosophic systems have talked for thousands of years about like the koshas, and so it's like
Totally,
the
yeah.
kosha of the physical body, the kosha of the energetic, the mental, the intuitive or wisdom body, and the kosha of the bliss body, and so like why am I mentioning this? Because it's like the layers of the body of the earth absolutely reflect the layers in of the bodies of the individual, and on. It keeps going ad infinitum in all directions. There's no end to it, but there is the replication that we will see. And so if we can learn certain fundamental principles and integrate them, then we understand that everything is affected. There's nothing that lives in a vacuum, and everything engenders effect. So where are you at in all of this? Like, how are you being affected? How are you engendering effect? And how can you become more mindful about how you're being affected and how you're engendering effect?
Well, isn't that really the main question that we need to take at heart for self-governance? Isn't that really the most
Yes.
important two questions that we could ask ourselves in order to eliminate the necessity for external government, for external rule?
It's not just government, it's also how we heal ourselves. It's the same thing. Because
Well,
ultimately,
yeah.
the system of medicine that is currently in the ruling system of medicine on the planet currently basically elucidates that we need to give the power over our body and the knowing and intelligence of what is happening with our body to someone external to us. And so it just comes back to that agency in terms of like, we need to take responsibility for the disease and we need to take responsibility for the health. And that is something when I was practicing as a clinician, that was my practice in terms of how can I elegantly articulate this and have this conversation with someone who's suffering.
Hey, yeah, because we're talking about two totally different states of consciousness and capacity to understand. When somebody's suffering, higher faculties oftentimes get shut down. That's one of the first things. It's like survival mode,
Absolutely. And then to tell someone that might not be able to contemplate something on a more holistic standpoint, that they're responsible for their sickness, can be very triggering.
Hey, there you
That
go.
doesn't mean it's not true, but
Yeah,
it can be
exactly.
very triggering. And that's one of those bitter pills, Fee?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yes. And I don't say this sitting on the sidelines like I've never jumped in the ring, because I have dealt with chronic illness a number of times in this lifetime. So I can say that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I've had these realizations myself. It's not something that's being said on behalf of the practitioner to hurt the patient, hurt the client. This is just
Or
oftentimes,
from my high horse of health and not knowing anything about what it feels like to be sick. No, no, no. I've been on the ground many times in my life, And so in
totally.
terms of like quantum healing, like the idea that like, we always think that healing is a process, and it is, but at the same time that like healing can happen instantaneously. I don't know about you, but like it's not just a belief, it is something I have experienced.
Yeah, same here.
Let's
Same
talk
here.
about that. That's interesting. People are interested in this because most people haven't experienced these things.
Well, maybe sometimes they have though. Sometimes they have, and maybe sometimes they just haven't recognized it because,
Possibly.
again, like one of the things that I see is that, like we were talking about, a lot of disease actually happens in these more subtle realms first, and most people are very disconnected from
100%.
the qualitative wellness of their subtle dimensions. And so they oftentimes don't even know that they're sick or getting sick or at a proclivity to get sick until it descends.
Boggles my mind.
Me too,
Boggles my mind.
but do you know why? Do you know why both you and I have long histories of being so chronically ill and learning how to fix it, and an insanely keen mind to philosophize and to understand, and a desire and an impetus to look at those subtle dimensions because our awareness has led us there. When most people, what I've come to realize is that most people we're not playing the same game. Like, we're not even playing with the same fucking pack of cards or the same set of tools. It's really true. We're not. There are some people that are playing like a totally different game. And what ended up happening for me is like I had to recognize, like, you know, not only are some people maybe not playing with a full deck of cards, they're not even playing with the same board game. Like, I thought we were all sitting down to play poker, and it's like Monopoly's going on over here. It really is like that for me. And so we've got to recognize that some people really need to like recognize the context that, oh, actually, guys, we're playing poker. And when we talk about health and wellness, literally there's a lot of checked outness all together, all the way around the realm, that it's like, okay, give me your attention for just 5 minutes, because here's the game. You thought you were playing another game, and that's actually part of the issue here, is that you are maladjusted to the environment. If we can reorient you to the environment and teach you the rules of poker, now you'll have a much better opportunity to fare well within the environment of what else is going on. And it reminds me of a movie called Mr. Deeds, where Steve Buscemi plays this guy where like one eye's going this way and the other guy is going this way. And, somebody's like, oh my God, Deeds is on TV. And he's like, Deeds, I thought we were watching Scooby-Doo. It totally reminds me of that moment half the time when I'm working with certain clients. And I'm privileged because the clients that I get to work with oftentimes have listened to my podcast, they've listened to my lectures, they've been students for a while in some capacity, or they've known some of my students who have been able to break things down. And so they're already coming to me with a greater sense of awareness. And I'm very privileged in that way at this time. But in the past, that was not the case. People would come to me and never know anything about my work or how I approach it or the interdisciplinary type of approach that I take and things like this. And you have to lay down those rules and get everybody on the same page. Otherwise, we're so disparate. And the fact of, and I think this is an important thing, but Aubrey, you and I grew up in a time where there was a general consensus on what reality was and what reality meant for most of our lives. Right. I know. Yeah, we've been in it now for so long. Well, and really, 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 it happened maybe as of 2015. Like, I started to see like, oh, there's a lot of different, like, no, there's many, many, many points of consensus. Before that, there were like little cracks in the fabric. You could see light poking through every once in a while, but realistically, still cohesive. 2019 comes around, 2020 comes around, boom. It's like, okay, cool. It's all just cracks. It's all just like little light now coming through. And which thread of light do we follow? So, when it comes to health, though, when it comes to wellness and quantum healing, I think that this is one of the most important things, is that we have to break people out of the paradigms that healing is a multidimensional process. It happens on many levels simultaneously. If we're just approaching one dimension, if we're just trying to eliminate what's going on the physical, that's really no better than taking a pharmaceutical drug, regardless of what system of medicine we're using, because
Totally.
it's still just addressing the symptom in most cases. Unless,
That's
of
right.
course, the disease that you're dealing with is just a broken bone, a cut, and even then there's mental and emotional healing that needs to be done with those things oftentimes too. But you know what I mean? Unless it's like pure physical or blunt force type of trauma, um, we've got
Right, or
to
you're like
align people
bleeding
to
or
the
something like
rules.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We got to align
Well,
people to the rules of the game.
here's kind of how it was like transmitted to me, right? Was that, as a, as a clinician, like it is our role to, which currently I'm not really practicing as a clinician, but it's like once you're a clinician or practitioner, you are for life. This is a vocation.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so you always have your hat, you can just put your hat back on. But the thing is, it's like you want to alleviate symptoms, but you don't want to stop there. But you have to alleviate symptoms sometimes so you can have a conversation with someone, because if they're dealing with so much pain, you can't try to get them to think about what the root cause is, because they just
Yeah.
need alleviation of the pain or of the symptoms that they're dealing with. And so that's the thing, is it's like it's always going to be about alleviation of symptoms, but you can't stop there. And that's where our current conventional orthodox system just stops with alleviation of symptoms. But then, using pharmaceutical medicine with all the side effects, then like the leak sprouts someplace else, and then they patch it up with
Yeah.
another pharmacy, and then the leak sprouts someplace else. And it's just like all they're doing is just like putting patches on a hose that is, about to just like burst, basically, and
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
people just don't even realize that this is going on. But, there's actually a concept that has been really, really helpful to me in understanding the whole phenomena of like quantum healing and how to elicit healing. And that, like, one of these things that I think a lot about is hormesis. And so
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's like a really important thing. And but at the same time, it's like we don't have the right modulation. So like people think stress is bad. Stress is bad, right? You got to stay away from stress. Actually, stress is a normal biological response. It's helps everything from like the cellular to like all the tissues and systems that are organized to adapt to something. And when you adapt, it's helping you to actually function better. Here's an example. Have you ever taken combo?
No, but Nori did.
All right. Maybe we'll have, if you ever want to experience this, we'll have to get together and get into this. So what's interesting about combo for me is it's a therapeutic hormesis, essentially. And so it's affecting the cardiovascular system. It's affecting basically all the major systems, not muscular, not skeletal, but like, endocrinological and the cardiovascular and the digestive. It's affecting all the major systems by basically you're injecting a neurotoxin into the body, and it's sending off like an alarm to all of these systems, right? All of these systems are going to have an opportunity to do what they were designed to do. It's the same reason why, and like that's what we want. We want to test the systems, because then how well, it's like a fire drill. It's like why we do fire
Yeah.
drills at school as kids, it's like you want to test it. So in the case there's an emergency, what needs to be improved to function adequately to respond to that, right? It's the same thing, for example, if you're looking at, say, like raising children holistically and how like holistic medical approach to childhood illness, like in a lot of cases, and I'm sure you encountered this when your daughter was growing up, it's like you definitely do not, give a child IV. This is a specific, I'm not saying you shouldn't, everyone is different. I do not want to, construe that I'm giving medical advice right now, but according to like a holistic medical model, you do not give a child an ibuprofen every single time there is an elevated temperature. You do not do that, because the elevated temperature is a natural response, is an adaptive response of the body. It's doing the temperature is burning off toxins, it's eliminating toxins. And by putting something pharmaceutical in the body, that's going to suppress the body's natural response. This is just, it's distorting the wisdom and intelligence of the body. And this is something, unfortunately, that we've been doing individually, collectively, planetarily for a really long time as we've been interfering, distorting, perverting, rewriting the intelligence, the natural intelligence. And so we need to come back to establish that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's actually absolutely critical. You know,
Absolutely critical.
yeah, when you were talking about, yeah, giving, ibuprofen or other things, anything that acts as a febrifuge, basically,
Right.
to folks with fever, like, unless their temperature is high enough that it's going to start damaging tissues or other
Totally.
critical
Right.
systems, it's like,
Right.
no, let's
Or
let it
that
run its course. It's
even,
there.
I mean, even if there's a risk of, dehydration, then you just hydrate, and
Yeah,
use saline salts or whatever. But like you allow things to, you watch and you modulate the fever. That's
yeah,
basically it. Yeah. And so like that, it's like that, I think, adopting that perspective as to the individual from the physiological to the most subtle level, adapting that perspective of how the individual interfaces with the greater environment at large, from the most physical to the most subtle level. Like that's where we need to be operating from. And in order to do that, we just need to learn to observe. We need to become very observant at first.
yeah. Well, this really ties in, especially when we have diseases of excess or diseases of toxicity.
Consumption,
This is where the
consumptive
whole
disorders.
concept of panchakarma really comes in, right? Is being able to cleanse, and on a very multidimensional level, because you're not just performing physical cleansing, although there is a lot of that, oftentimes purgatives and basti and all these other things, but then we also have the emotional cleansing and mental cleansing and lifestyle cleansing and puja and
Panchakarma is like so dear to me, Phoenix. I mean, like I, directed Panchakarmas for 15 years. It's something that is extremely, extremely dear. And, about Hormesis, I'll give you an example. And like you were saying about like pujas. And so like, not everybody might be familiar with pujas. And so essentially these are rituals that can evoke different planetary deific influences. And so it's subtle level, or what you would consider spiritual medicine, and you're basically recalibrating on all levels. I'll give you an example, right? So like we've had such extreme drought here in the Amazon. It's finally looks like it's starting to break, and we've had some rains in the last couple of weeks. We lost a lot of stuff, right? Because
wow,
the drought
really?
was so intense. Yeah. A lot of the coca was really affected because it really was, the environment like shifted and it just became inhospitable for the coca here. But so like some of the cocas have died, but like some of them have come back. And what I've observed watching like the plants, and like when I was spending an hour or two a day watering just to keep things going and trying to keep as much as I could going.
Wow.
But what I observed was that once the rain started to come back, certain things like became so vibrant. And so it's so interesting because it's an example of this like hormesis. You can observe this in any ecosystem, in like how an ecosystem can thrive and come back after a drought or after a natural burn. And maybe not everything is going to survive, but those that do will be stronger than before.
Hey, this is a really important concept. In fact, for a while, I was engaging in a practice known as radiation hormesis. And the whole concept is that we take pitch blend or very low level radioactive uranium scrap, and
Like a homeopathic dose or something.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is that it harms the cells that are unhealthy, that have poor cell membrane health, that have poor function, cancer cells, the weakest cells in the body, basically. But it's not enough radiation to harm a healthy cell with a good, healthy cell membrane.
Clean it out.
Exactly, clean it out, which leaves only healthy cells
That's right.
to be able to replicate. And
That's right.
so this is one of the things that I played around with in the past that was very heavily inspired by Arthur Kunken. And you may have known Art. Other people kind of knew of Art. He served on the board of mental physics in Joshua Tree, California. And he taught like hand actualized mental reconditioning. Back in the day, he owned the Way of the Magus school that was teaching Dzogchen meditation to like 300 people a week, and doing things that he started the Los Angeles Free Press. He worked with Frater Albertus and became once he learned the astrological influences that allow a person to get more gold. He went to the gold mines in Nevada and served as a consultant there. I mean, this guy was just crazy. And by the time I met him, he was this tiny guy, maybe a 5'3", 5'4" man, tiny Jewish guy from New York, lived in California for a long time, and he was like 86 years old. And what he was doing at the time was putting he'd have a glass jar with the lid on it, and then he would fill about 2/3 of that jar with what's called pitch blend, radioactive uranium scrap. And then he would put a single apple in on that uranium scrap, and then basically let the apple ripen in there, and then go ahead and eat one apple a week. And this guy had a girlfriend who was like 35 years younger than him. And she swore to God he could do everything in bed that a 20-year-old could do. He had to cut his fingernails like 3 times a week because they were growing so fast. And his hair too, and his hair stayed jet black until he died at like 95 years old. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing to see the amount of health that he went through by doing this. So that got me into...
It's a great example.
Yeah. I think that anything, it doesn't matter. And it goes back to Paracelsus' principle, or what is so commonly quoted in Western medical diagnosis, especially in the realm of toxicology, is that it is the dose that determines whether something is toxic or not. And
or healing, yes.
Stress, like you mentioned, absolutely critical for the
modulation
health of the whole body, and also for
how
the
much.
growth. But how much?
And how
and
often?
Yes.
And what
if we
kind?
stay in stress all the time, that's not
just
great.
oxidates. Yes, it oxidates everything.
Exactly.
Totally. I also think, in terms of hormesis, like take it, like remember the above below principle, it's like take it from a bigger perspective. Like sometimes, Phoenix, we can, potentially look at like the global stage and the different kinds of scenarios and situations that are unfolding as different kinds of hormetic processes that are unfolding for this as adaptive as an adaptive exercise for the entire species, ultimately.
Well,
that's a very interesting thing to meditate on, because we get so fixated in the individual perspective and what's happening to me, but when you look at it as like us as an organism, right? Like us as an organism, a lot of, let me give you an example. So like, okay, so lately the parakeets, the flocks of parakeets have been coming back because there's certain kinds of fruits here that they really like. So sometimes in the morning when I'm like having my tea ceremony and meditating, it's freaking deafening. It's like their shrieks cut the air. And so like, as you know, we've done like rescue and release projects with like lots of parakeets over the years. And so like when you have a little parakeet, they're like, weep, weep. But like when you have like 100 or 50 or like 200 deep, their voice becomes so amplified, right? And so you realize that these creatures are actually not, they're more comfortable in a like pod mentality or like a one mind mentality, And like another example, because, I live in the Amazon and I live with indigenous people here, is I notice it about them too. Like they're, and like the family that lives here on our property, like they're so much more comfortable when they're like in groups of like 50 deep. Like they just feel so much better like that. But we've been kind of raised and thought that we're so we're so highly individualized. But in reality, like, are we that different from these other species? And so maybe we need to consider the fact, like, from a special perspective as well. And so some of the shifts and changes that are happening on the planet currently are a way of testing the adaptive response of the species, right? And Fee, just like when you see a burn or a drought in nature, like not every little plant is gonna survive. in the forest, but
Yeah, absolutely.
it's about the overall health of the whole forest at large. That's a thing that, people may not be so, because of our individual kind of mentality, we may not everybody might be so aligned with that, or have, they may have like an issue with that, but I think that it bears consideration, is that we need to think in terms of the species and the health, the overall health or disease of the species. And especially if we want to heal the individual or ourselves, we need to think about the health of the species, the health of the planet, because it's all connected, it's all reflecting one another, and we can read, we can interpret, and then we can provoke and elicit the directional change that we would like to see.
Well, I think that this is really important, and it just takes us one step down. If we want to understand how to be able to do this responsibly and healthily, let's just take a look inside of our own bodies. When we do this, we take a look at organs being composed of tissues, tissues being composed of cells, and the DNA for those things being composed inside of the mitochondria and the mitochondrial DNA. We are, as individuals, the cell level, right, of things. And our immediate culture around us is going to be a tissue, of course, and the entire corpus of humanity is going to be the organ. And
There you
we have
go.
to take a look at how
The
that,
health on all the
yeah,
levels.
on all the levels. And we have to say, how does my role influence the
As a
tissue
cell,
health and therefore
yes,
the organ health? And how does my environment here actually end up changing my mitochondria, my resonance of how we continue to alter and respond to the circumstance, the terrain, the environment? And that really is so much of the type of evolution that we're doing here. While you were talking, Aubrey, I had this really crazy distinct impression here that we've talked about human beings before being like a cancer in how fast we're
just thinking
growing.
the same thing, Fee.
Well, and realistically, here's what I was looking at is that, I've been studying cancer stem cells for the last probably year and a half, and really taking a look at every different study that I can as to what creates cancer stem
Yeah.
cells. And as far as we can tell, it's a sincerely toxic environment that
Yes.
first starts with cell membrane inflammation. Now nutrition can't get in, toxins can't get out, this cell is feeling isolated. And
Yes.
because nutrition can't get in, toxins can't get out, it creates a super toxic cell environment. The mitochondrial DNA don't have what they need to rewind. It's
That is the
super
terrain
soiled.
for disease to flourish. Exactly.
And then we take a look at the hyper individualist approach and influencer culture and all this other nonsense, and we see that oftentimes those might be the cells that are the most inflamed, right, with the most cell membrane inflammation, and those are the ones that are also creating perhaps some of the most toxicity inside of our environment, where everybody else is comparing themselves to how fast am I growing. Well, it doesn't matter if fucking cancer cell is growing really fast. That's not a healthy response. But if you compare yourself to that and get surrounded by that to such a degree, that response ends up creating a response in you to do the same thing. That's called metastasis,
That's correct.
metastasization. So I think that, we need to really take a look at our human behavior individually, our
Yes,
human
Fee.
environment, and we need to be able to create some sense of healing. Because killing a cancer cell, if it's not a cancer stem cell, if it's a cancer cell, easy peasy to kill. There's some of the weakest cells. And I mean, literally, you can use fucking chemotherapy to kill these cells. You know what I mean? Like, it's a pretty simple thing. Like, on the other hand, killing the cancer stem cells takes a little bit more finesse. We have to be able to see what really stops the function of these cells
Yes. The
and
root.
what can penetrate down through the different layers to re-change that kind of mitochondrial response that said, we're going haywire. We're going haywire.
I think that if anyone, it's funny because I was having a similar thought to what you just expressed throughout this conversation. And the thought was, I don't want to be the cancer cell of the organism, you know? I want to be that cell that helps to advance the system forward, basically. And I think if anyone's going to take anything away from this conversation that we're having today, it's about having maybe more introspection and reflection objectively about, what is emanating? What do we emanate? How much health or toxicity do we emanate on all the levels? Assessment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it starts.
Well, and I think that this is why, it gets easily overlooked and dismissed when you say, if you want to change culture, start with yourself. But I think that this is literally the most important thing, because what I've seen in my own experience is that the more work that I end up putting into myself, the more that I have other individuals say, how did you get to that state? Like, I want what you've got right there. How did you get healthy? How did you get sane? How did you get not bothered? How did you get brave? How did you get, whatever.
Love it.
And I think that that's the most important thing. When we provide a better and more stable and more healthy model than a cancer cell, other cells are going to want to say the same thing and say,
Correct.
wait, this is unsustainable. I'm running myself ragged. How do I get back to this state? How do I get back to the state of a healthy cell? And realistically, it's the exact same answer on just a scaled up perspective as what it is for the cell itself.
Yes.
Draw down your inflammation, which is to say, really our inflammation are driven by our egos and our desire to want to keep up with the Joneses and the influencers and all the other shit. Like, if we can stop inflaming our own personalities and draw down the inflammation and not do things for other people's approval or attention or awareness, but to do them for our own sense of accomplishment and feeling good, that gets rid of most of the inflammation right there, And then from there, it's feed good nutrition. So this is what you were talking about. Feed the senses.
Sensory impressions, yeah.
Exactly. Good food and the sensory impressions and pure material,
Yeah.
Good, find yourself laughing more than you find yourself being stressed in a day, and just watch the way
complaining.
That changes. Yeah, exactly. Or complaining, or repeating what's stressful, or repeating what's going on in the world in a negative context. If we can break those patterns, and that helps us to take in the healthy material. And then the other thing is to push out the unhealthy material. What is unhealthy? Unhealthy are going to be any of the toxins that influence our mind, that influence our spirit, that influence our emotions in states.
And the physical body, of course.
And our physical body, of course, that are not in a direction that is going to be conducive for the state that we're trying to achieve.
100%.
And it's really, like, when you get down to the basics, like you were talking about earlier, with the principles of quantum healing, when we get back to them, they're fucking simple. We just have to disentangle. And that is the hardest part, because the entanglement is an addictive loop.
Yes, it is.
Just stepping away from that and being okay, and knowing you're not going to die from stepping away from the inflammatory addiction, right? We won't. You'll actually be just fine. You will be just fine. And what's cool is when you do it for just a little bit, this has been my own experience, when you step away for just a little bit and then you decide to, maybe let me go back on and check out what's going on social media. Oh, fuck. All of a sudden I feel really terrible again. Okay, now I remember why I'm not doing that. Like, I don't want to go down that path. The contrast becomes so great that once you set your mind and your goal to be a healthy cell, to be a healthy individual, those things that do not produce or proliferate more health are at such a vast contrast to where you're going that it's easy to just disentangle and to choose to disentangle. But it leads to, because there is such a sociological craze towards this, it does lead to a more lonely life.
Well, as Krishnamurti said, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a severely sick society, right?
Yes,
And so
exactly.
that has to do with pratyahara and with stewarding the senses and the information coming through the senses. And that's why in the Eastern traditions, they consider, or in Buddhist traditions, they consider the Sangha to be one of the three treasures, the three jewels, because the Sangha is the company. And so it's like, that's either going to catapult you into a level of self-realization or do exactly the opposite and bring you down. And so it's like, sometimes we have to get more objective beyond our nostalgic or emotional, sentimental feelings and think, what, is this, how is this affecting me? Is this affecting me beneficially? Or, how do I modulate my interactions here? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is really very important. And I think that if humanity is not questioning these things currently, then humanity is not poised for the next evolutionary step that is, upon us ultimately. Like, we must be questioning how, like basically what you just laid out, like what are we emanating and how aligned is it with viable, sustainable frequency or not? And what do I need to do to align with a frequency that is more viable, sustainable on every single level, from the thoughts, from the mental impressions to the physical impressions. And, it's not just what you're taking in, but it's also what you're emanating and putting out there. So this is where we're at. It's like we need to be asking ourselves these questions. I'm curious, I was thinking it might be nice to kind of like round out our talk to talk a little bit about like personal experience with quantum healing. What do you think? Because
Sure. Yeah.
a lot of people just think it's like, a lot of people are at the place where they're like, well, I believe in it, but they may not necessarily, like you said, sometimes we have the experience, but we don't even acknowledge it because it might be happening on such a subtle level. But like, I'd love to hear a little bit about like your experience with quantum healing. I'm happy to share a little bit too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, shit. My experience with quantum healing goes back really quite far and really quite deep. But, that's the whole thing that I'm using with intrinsic data field work, is that whole concept is I'm just influencing quantum scalar level, or what we would refer to as the intrinsic data field, and just changing that up. And then we can see how, by changing the programming that sets the electrical tone that then precipitates into the physical, that we can alter just about anything. So, I mean, I have eliminated in myself bacterial infections, quote unquote. I don't even really like to use the term infection, so I'll just call it an imbalance, but a bacterial imbalance, especially streptococcus. I was even able to, this was on a client, not on myself, but with that same streptococcus thing, be able to take somebody who had an ongoing strep infection for so long that it caused glomerulonephritis, basically scar tissue, tons of scar tissue in the kidneys. We were able to change the pattern of that in the IDF. And as confirmed by CT scans, all the scar tissue was able to be gone in 6 months, which is otherwise a completely irreversible condition. When they talk about nephritis and other,
Yeah.
it's like there's no way of doing that. So I've seen that, but we've also one of the things that we check for over here with the clients that we work with is their ens veneni, Paracelsus term for causation of toxins or causation of toxicity. And inside of there, we're not just dealing with physical toxins, but largely we're dealing with what I would refer to as neuro-emotional toxins, which can either be emotions that weren't felt because
Or
they
fully
were,
processed.
or fully processed. And usually those are not the fully traumatic situations. Those are things where, somebody said something in an
You just
offhanded
kind of block
way,
it out.
and it
You
messed me
don't
up.
allow
I
yourself
wasn't
to
in a
acknowledge it.
situation where I could like address or process that, like
Yeah.
it wasn't socially appropriate, it wasn't the right time. And so you forget about it. But after, say, 24 hours, 72 hours, whatever, depends on the scope of the emotion, I suppose. But we have like some sort of time limit to it, to where it's like still present and we can process it, but we often just get caught up and don't process it. But those things that don't get processed just end up floating around as a toxin until we process them. So I suggest to all of my clients, once every 3 days, just go, and once you get it down to the every 3 days, then just at the end of your work day, before you leave work, or at the end of your day before you go to bed, think about all of those things that happened throughout the day that generated a little bit of emotional resonance, and then just give
Malaise.
yourself permission to feel it. It usually takes seconds to actually feel those things and process it, come to peace with it. But then you're not falling asleep, forgetting about it, and then just building up and accumulating these
There's an
toxins.
accumulation. Exactly.
Exactly. But then the other thing are what we'd refer to as traumas, right? And a lot of these are prenatal traumas that we have when we are in utero and experiencing the
Yeah.
difficult emotions that our mothers experienced, and running off of the predominant hormones and neurotransmitters that are being given to us through our mother's blood supply. These are the types of things that can massively traumatize us, as well as being born. The act of being born is
Yes.
highly traumatic. And then all of these weird little things that can happen in the first few formative years that really shape the way that we look at the world. And usually they're fucking proportionate. Like, mommy didn't give us the bowl of Cheerios, and that told me I'm not loved. It's like we jump to some really huge things, right? So it's not the action itself, it's the perception of it. And changing our perception is so critical to changing the way that we get healed. But we'll see these things as what are referred to in German New Medicine as biological conflicts showing up for a vast majority of our clients, myself, of course, included. I'm client number one of myself.
Of course.
Yeah,
As
exactly.
it should be.
Yeah, I work on myself more than I work on any other clients. It's just what
As
I'm
it should be.
constantly doing. Yeah. So with that being said,
I appreciate that.
I think that being able to I was trained how to do this in the Rosicrucian tradition. This is why I said it goes way back. Long before I was using IDF stuff, the Rosicrucians, in the true and invisible order, is what we call it. This isn't like amorc shit and whatever else. This is, people are Rosicrucians, honestly, in my opinion, if you don't know that they're Rosicrucians. They would not have to tell you I'm a Rosicrucian, I follow this philosophy, I go to these meetings, I do these fucking rituals, I think we're from Egypt, all this other shit. There's no pretense to it. There's just being a really good person. And one of the tenets to how to characterize and how to build the character of being a good person is to do selfless healings. And so typically every Thursday night, there would be every true and invisible Rosicrucian out in the world would find somebody in their community that they had heard about or that they had seen. And oftentimes they would go and draw a sketch of that individual or ask for a piece of clothing from that individual or whatever else. And you focus on that, and you focus on the disease or the harm that that individual has incurred. And then you just see the healing of that. And we do that for 1 to 3 hours every Thursday for at least one person. And the more that your psychic senses get attuned to being able to perform this psychic healing, which is the exact same way that you perform psychic attack, by the way. The only difference is that you're focusing on the healing instead of on the destruction. So when you do this for long enough, you find that a lot of these individuals are moving in vastly different directions with their health for no other explainable reasons. And that gives a sense of just quietly in the background being able to help humanity. And that's why for me it was such an easy pivot to utilizing IDF tools, is because I'm already doing this. I'm having to use all of my focus just to work on this one person. If I can take my intention and send it out to more people and be more efficient with the process, fuck, I would love to do that. That's exactly what I want to be doing with my life. Be a little bit more efficient and help to heal more traumas, help to heal more physical disease and psychological disease. And so, yeah, my experience with quantum healing goes really quite deep in a lot of ways, of course. And I think more than anything I can point to, it's for myself, all the ways that I've had to heal myself and my own relationships, psychological relationships, in order to get to the essence of what was going on physically. Even, my pale skin, I used to say, oh man, I I get so sunburned. I get so sunburned. I talked to Dr. Karina Lopez. I don't know if you guys know each other, but you really should. You really should. I feel like you and her would just be fantastic friends. She's a extraordinary multidisciplinary homeopath and naturopath. She lives in Greece with one of my best friends, Sakis. And anyway, we had a podcast episode together, and she told me right there on the podcast, I was telling her about getting burned and having a problem with vitamin D synthesis, and she said, "Oh, well, that's coming from a problem that you're having with your mother." And I said, "Wow." And she said, "Yeah, you're treating the sun as your mother, and you're shying away from its presence because it's too much." Ooh. So anyway, last winter I ended up engaging in some solar worship, and in doing that, the Gayatri mantra, I was like, oh, we're not talking to the sun, we're talking to the mother of the sun in Gayatri mantra. The mother of the sun. There was all of these mother associations that I wasn't even aware of. And of course, like in German, the sun is feminine. Die Sonne. In Irish, it's feminine. On Korean, it's a feminine thing. So I started treating the sun as a feminine force and honoring that feminine force, and it changed the entire relationship. I haven't got burned once, and I'm spending hours and hours of direct
It's a great example.
into the sun. And simultaneously, my vitamin D receptors ended up healing themselves, and my vitamin D response elements changed, and I've been able to actually synthesize vitamin D for the first time in years.
That's a great example of quantum healing.
Yeah.
I just want to comment on something you said about like your desire and intention to want to elicit as much healing as possible, because I think that I also operated from that intention for a very long time, and I use the past tense, and I'll explain why. And so what I think I've learned over time, so like, the work that I've done as a clinician has been very dynamic and very like multifaceted and almost multidimensional, because on one hand it's like, I had very kind of stringent medical training in Ayurvedic medicine, which can be very technical in terms of like physiology and anatomy and like learning how to, address pathology systemically and all of this kind of thing. And then having had the immersion into like traditional systems of medicine, which Ayurveda is one, but like I'm talking more like folkloric, like in the Amazon traditional, Amazonian traditional medicine, and learning to work more energetically. So it's a very divergent kind of spectrum in terms of like working physiologically and more materially, and also working very much like energetically. And so what I think I've learned over the time of my practice is that sometimes, Phoenix, there are processes that are in effect that we are not meant to interfere with for various reasons. And sometimes those reasons are beyond what we can comprehend with our minds, or what we can understand in terms of like this lifetime. There's like a trajectory beyond. And so that's when, for me, the ardent desire and intention that I held for so long to want to heal others and to alleviate others of their suffering, it really shifted and transformed a lot. And the reason why I had this ardent desire was because I suffered physiologically, mentally, emotionally from a lot of different disorders growing up. And so, I empathically understood suffering, and I didn't want to see other people experience that. But what I've seen and observed over time was that suffering is not, sorry about that. Suffering, it's interesting, the timing, right? Suffering is not necessarily bad, because there are things that are beyond how we dualistically understand reality in terms of good or bad. Suffering is. And sometimes there is a reason for suffering. Sometimes there is a reason for suffering. So to think that we need to alleviate all suffering, sometimes suffering is what engenders transformation, Not
just sometimes, I would say most of the time, yeah.
If we survive if we adapt to the stress, as we talked about, if we survive the hormesis, and physically can adapt, responsively can adapt, then we will be stronger, we will be more flexible, more adaptive, more systems can function better on every level, but not all suffering is meant to be alleviated. And so then the question is, how do I know when to interfere and when not to? That's the contemplative line of thinking that I sat with for a long time. And then I needed to start to sit with, what is my true motivation for wanting to alleviate suffering? And I had to really unpack all of that. It became a very deep kind of contemplative inquiry that has been ongoing over a number of years. So I mention this because that doesn't mean that like I don't want to help people to alleviate their suffering. Not at all. I mean, obviously, none of us want to feel pain. None of us want to suffer. If I have tools, techniques, or experience that can potentially help someone, I'm happily, available to be able to share, but there needs to be a certain level of receptivity and desire to want to heal. And what I've seen, I don't know about you, if you've ever seen this, but what I've seen is that sometimes people say that they want to get better, but that's not reflective in their actions, that's not necessarily coherent with their choices. And so that creates even more distortion internally, like, oh, I want to heal, I want to live, but there's no addressing of this underlying toxic terrain that is the cause, the root cause of why this is coming to pass. And I really think that sometimes the alleviation of suffering or the alleviation of symptom and pathology is not the end goal necessarily. Sometimes the end goal is simply what we understand about ourselves from the process of suffering. If that makes sense. Meaning,
all of it, yeah.
It may, and then you're getting into like a bigger picture understanding about karma. Like it may or may not be in the cards to heal, but the goal might be about what we learn and understand about ourselves through the process that we're enduring. That's a lot to digest.
Well,
so
it is a lot. Well, and I was going to ask you, which you kind of elaborated upon already, was what were your conclusions about those questions and your answers, or are they just conclusions for now and still evolving? Or
always, for me, it's always
go.
just where I'm at now, and it's always evolving. Because if I think about like where I sat 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, like I have very different kinds of perspectives and conclusions now than I did at that point. So what makes me think that now I have the be all end all understanding of something? No, it's just going to continue to refine itself over time. But I did want to maybe share an example of quantum healing,
Yes,
because
please.
I've had a number of very unique kind of very unique phenomena. I've had a number of things happen over time. And so one time in particular, this was about, I don't think we're talking about like 2010, maybe 2009. I had a group of people here at the center that were coming down to do some work with plants. And I had a bit of a disagreement with the person that was bringing the group down. And the person that was bringing the group down, I had told this person like, hey, it all comes down to money a lot of the times, unfortunately, like, hey, like, here's our cancellation policy. Here it is. And the person said, okay, great, I understand it. And then later on, it was like, they forgot about that and they were like, no, actually, this is what I want. And it's like, well, actually, this is our cancellation policy. Yeah. And so this person did not like no, as some people don't really have a hard time accepting no. And so, and this happens very often in certain indigenous cultures where when people get, annoyed or angry at other people, they employ certain means and measures energetically for their like comeuppance. And so I had a group here and I was fine before the group came, but when this person was here, and this person actually was very connected with people who do specific kinds of rituals in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So I got very sick very fast, and there was no kind of like physiological, like there was no turning point. There was no, oh, I know it was because, I was, wet and cold and I caught a flu. It wasn't anything like that. It literally came out of nowhere and I became very, very, very ill very quickly. And to the point where I was questioning if I was going to survive or not. And I can remember,
Wow.
yeah, I've
Jesus,
had
what was it? Like a cholera type of thing?
brujeria. No, it was a brujeria, and so a witchcraft. And
Yeah.
so, and the thing is, having lived
But I
in the
mean, the
Amazon,
symptoms, I mean, I know
oh,
it
I'll
was
tell you.
witchcraft.
I'll tell
Okay.
you. Yeah. So like, here's the thing with witchcraft is that people are like here in the Amazon, healthy people die all the time of
Yeah.
witchcraft, and then they go and have Western diagnostics done that show nothing. And so it's an energy. It's an energy that basically your life force is being like sucked out of you, essentially. And so because I was working with plants at this point in time, I had a very kind of intuitive insight into my own process while I was working with the plants. And I can remember in one of the experiences, I felt so ill. I was like so discombobulated, Phoenix, which was like highly unusual for me because even though, I've been trained, Hormesis, to take plants for like the last 25 years. And so I know that even when I'm altered, I'm still very centered. And so I was extremely discombobulated. I couldn't even tell up or down. I literally like crawled back to my house. And I remember I got into my house. I was so weak. I stood I stood in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and all I could see was my own skull and like the skin pulled over like my skull. It looked so death, like I saw death in me in a way that I had never experienced, right? It was so intense. And yet there was no thought of there was no fear and no thought of, oh my God, am I dying? Because that's how little prana and life force energy I had. It was just like, this is what's happening. And I remember I got into bed, I felt so weak that when someone came into the room, I couldn't even turn my eyeballs or my head to look at them because that's how much the life force was waning. And I thought, this is it. I'm a goner, right? And this is even before my daughter was born. So like, can you imagine like how different the timeline would have written itself? And so I explained very, in depth what was happening to me and why I thought this was happening to me. And someone who we both know who was familiar with these kinds of dynamics was able to work on a very energetic level and reverse the flow that was coming towards me and that was taking the energy out of me. And immediately I got well. Immediately I got well. Like literally, I don't know if this was actually physiological, it would have taken months or years to recover from that.
Totally. Easily.
But no, I was just well in like 24 hours after this procedure was done.
That's crazy, but it's not that crazy. I had a client who is very, very psychically gifted and he doesn't know it. And I've never told him. Part of the reason why is that he damn near killed me. And his mind is so powerful, but he will literally fixate on a person and bad things happening to them mentally. And I mean, I have some pretty severe protections around me at all times. For it to be able to break through all of that and to have affected me so intensely was ridiculous. And luckily I was working with an IDF tech. I didn't have my own equipment at that time, but I was working with an IDF tech. And I said, this hit me so hard and out of nowhere, and it's hitting Nori, and we're both going downhill. Will you search to see if this is a curse? And he comes back like less than 20 seconds later and says, yes, it is a curse. And I said, is this person doing this? And he says, yes. And he says, well, technically, though, it's not a curse. This is a psychic attack. And he started running us on a broadcast to clear it. And within seconds, after 3 days of Nori and I being like completely dead, completely drained to the worst degree of my life, we started to come back. Within 20 minutes, we were just fine. So it wasn't even like 24 hours. Like, I think, this is actually why I started offering a service to break curses, hexes, jinxes, psychic attack, evil eye, malevolent, harmful, malicious, malevolent, evil spells and incantations and other shit, and to also clear entities from people's space, because I'm seeing the immense amount of wellness potential that is being hindered by these things. You know,
Phoenix, just because people don't believe in this does not mean that it doesn't exist and that they can't be affected by it.
hey, let's unpack that. Let's unpack that. This is an important one. Belief, I have said, and this is not a super popular opinion at present. This is not, because most people operate within the realm of belief for everything. Oh, I believe in herbal medicine. I believe in this. I believe in that.
It only gets you so far, really.
Well, yeah, exactly. When my clients come to work with me and they say, well, I say, I don't care what you believe in. Your beliefs are insane. They literally are. Like, if we're looking to be healthy, I need you to get rid of your beliefs, because beliefs are insane. Belief literally causes us this dynamic to take something that we are expressing doubt about because we don't have direct experience or direct knowledge of the thing. And so instead, we take whatever pieces of data that should help us to know something, but there's no knowledge to know, so we don't know it. But instead, we try to get a belief system, which is an emotional sense of certainty, to fill that place of knowledge. If we had knowledge or experience of something, we wouldn't have to believe in it. We could actually say, I know or I experience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
On the other hand, belief is something where we say, I don't have
the experience of this,
I have
but
no
I'm
knowledge and I
investing
have
in
no
this.
experience,
I'm
but I
investing in
know
this
it's right.
position.
Yes, exactly. And you're investing all of your emotional certainty in
Fair.
it.
Just be honest with yourself about what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, I want to think that is so much easier. Like, if we just get rid of beliefs and replace them with ideas, an idea is super malleable.
Yes.
Doesn't shatter our whole fucking paradigm.
Yes, good.
When somebody presents an idea that challenges another idea.
Yes.
In fact, we can be open to it and say, well, actually,
I'll
I
consider
might
that.
want to adapt either all or some of this other idea into
Correct.
cosmology, because it seems more fitting, and there's good sense to this. But a belief, when we form the entire nature of our being and our identity based on
It's a
belief,
foundation. And if that foundation is faulty, then what do? Continue to build on top of the faulty foundation?
exactly. And
Isn't
this
that
is
cognitive dissonance? It's not going to get us anywhere good.
it doesn't get us anywhere good. And
No.
so when people
I'm
say,
with you.
I believe in herbal medicine, or I don't believe in herbal medicine, or I believe that Jesus is healing me, or
Throw
I
the
believe
balls up in the air. Let it all be up for reconsideration. That's what I say.
that's exactly right. Is like,
Yes.
that's that for me in the work that I do with my clients, 95%
That's
of the
adaptive.
time, I try and say,
That's
we need to break
survival.
down those beliefs. Have the idea. Okay, I'm not telling you to like change what you think, but change from a belief, get rid of that emotional certainty around it, because that's going to tie in all sorts. Like, I always point to this when I teach my classes, and I can say, this table behind me here is actually a turtle. And they'll be like, what are you talking about, dude? And I'll say, well, no, look, super hard back, 4 legs. It's a turtle. I can come up with
That's your
reasons
belief.
and I can justify, based on limited evidence, that my belief system might be right because there's limited evidence. But unless all the evidence stacks up, then it's the reality is, this is not a fucking turtle. This is a table. And if we take a look at archetypes, we can say there are archetypal similarities between a turtle and a table, and then we can identify those and say, that's really interesting. Perhaps some of the archetypal significance of what happens with a turtle and a table actually overlaps. But those are just ideas. There's no sense of belief that this is that. I don't have to confuse or cross any wires. I can just have ideas. And I think that it's really important for
To stay
humanity
mentally flexible.
to stay
Ideologically
mentally
flexible.
Yep. Otherwise, we oftentimes end
100%.
up making ourselves sick more times than not with our beliefs and information that conflicts with those beliefs that is in our face.
100%. We try to fit things to maintain the belief system, and then things break down, rather than being open to reconsider that the belief system that we have invested in up until that point may or may not be true. That's, yeah, I mean, trees break all the time, branches break all the time off trees when there is a point of inflexibility. And so I think that, you know, coming back to like the big picture perspective that we started this conversation with, it's extremely certain things, you know, in terms of like, I always felt that like one of the key principles of health is adaptability and flexibility on every single level. This is what my training has shown me. Every time I get triggered, it's an opportunity for me to take a look at like, where am I fixated and why? What have I invested in? And typically it comes down to the ego, and it comes down to that we are identified with a certain belief or a certain idea or a certain position or being right about something. And so if we can let that go, then we've just created a whole lot of spaciousness for potentiality, possibility, change, growth, healing, quantum to open up. That's where I want to hang out always, Phoenix. Yes.
Yeah, you and me both. You and me both.
That's right.
That's where the greatest sense of malleability and openness and wellness actually come from, in my experience. That's like the wellspring of wellness, actually, holistically, is adaptability, flexibility, and receptivity to change in a healthy and more positive environment. And that doesn't always mean that the changes that you're going to be presented with are going to be pretty or easy to swallow or easy to go through. In fact, oftentimes quite the contrary. Unless there's a crisis, transformation won't happen. And so change can happen without crisis. Change can happen, but change is just going from one polarity to the other oftentimes. That's all that a change is. Transformation is a form of transcendence, and saying it's neither here nor there. It's all places and everywhere in between, you know.
Well, think about the word transformation. It's not going to be the same form that it was. And so that means something, that form that was previously, needs to break down. So if you're so invested in that form, are you willing to go down with the ship, is what it comes down to.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
no,
me either. Yeah, fuck the ship. Get me on the
ship. That's right. I'll swim as far as I can.
Yeah.
And then I'll float until someone comes and hauls me out of the water, you know?
Yep.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like hormesis, resilience, regenesis, right? Hormesis, resilience, regenesis. And so resilience is not being strong and maintaining against all the influences that have come to elicit transformation. Resilience means you allow yourself to be broken down. You allow yourself to be pulverized, because there is something that will regenerate from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. So you got to be willing to put it all into the fire, you know. And I tell you, I don't speak these words that easily if I have not been subject to these processes over and over and over again in life. And here I am, I'm still here. And to be perfectly honest with you, Phoenix, like I feel like I give great thanks every single day. I feel like I've achieved a greater state of health at this point in my life on every single level than I ever have previously. And so that goes against the whole like progressionist idea that like, oh, you'll be healthier in your youth, and then as you get older, things degenerate. I mean, that's also like, a belief, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, and you know, my mom, for instance, one of those people who's much healthier now than she ever has been her entire life.
That's wonderful.
You know, in her 60s. And same thing I think is true for a lot of individuals. Part of that is availability to information. Again, the environment that we have and the adaptability to absorb that information, and
the receptivity and the ability to be able to consider different alternatives and possibilities and treatment protocols and all of that kind of thing.
Everything. Yeah,
all
exactly. Yeah, super, super important. I think Yeah, this entire conversation has been really awesome and poignant. And
I hope it's helpful for people because we are at a crux, man.
yeah, I know. Well, and realistically, it's this. If your cell is so damaged that unfortunately you can't be part of the tissue anymore, thank you for playing along. It's time for you to go, apparently. And thank you for the role that you've served, and we're going to miss you. And for those who are willing to get on the bandwagon and change their cellular environment and help to make healthier tissues and healthier organs, thank you so much. Hopefully this information puts shit in context for you. That's kind of really the way that I feel. We're at that point where there
I
are
love
going
that
to
you have the balls to express that because that's not a popular opinion, Phoenix. Popularist opinion is that, let's lowest common denominator, or greatest common denominator, let's save the flock, let's save the herd, no matter what the degenerative condition of the herd, and we'll do that at any cost to the entire herd.
Oh,
And
well, do you know why they'll do it? Is specifically because of the
profit
cost.
driven.
Because of the profit. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
It's because of
of
the
course,
cost. And
of course.
so, for me, the thing is, I am not going to profit off of your wellness, and I'm
Yes,
not
that's
going to
different.
profit off of your sickness. That's not what I'm in any of this for. And the system that we have is built on that, and it's not helping you. When the Red Cross and other fucking organizations are out there saying, we lost 355,000 people to heart disease last year, they don't give a shit. What they just said was we had 350,000 people, and out of those, only 1/3 of them were on our fucking medications. That's what their whole point of even pulling those statistics is about. And I'm not willing to drag dead weight through the mud who isn't willing to help themselves. If you're willing to help yourself, and if you're willing to be part
You
of
don't
a
need to worry about that. Neither do I. Do you know why, Faye? Because that's nature's law. We
bingo,
don't need, that's it.
and that's where we're
Yeah.
at, actually, is with
Yes,
nature.
we
We're
are.
going to see, like,
Yes, we
all of
are.
these clowns that are out there talking about carbon dioxide being climate change. I mean, fucking absolute clowns. What we actually have right now is we have a severe situation of polar flip and polar drift. And this will eventually turn into a polar shift all the way around. And we're not more than maybe 20 to 30 years away from this at the present moment by the very best analyses that we can possibly provide. And that's going to be such a cataclysmic event on a world stage level as the magnetosphere continues to decrease, as solar geomagnetic activity continues to disproportionately affect us more, and as the poles actually flip, the amount of water displacement alone from this type of thing is going to be catastrophic to most of the biological forms of life that we already know. We cannot have weak cells. We cannot have weak tissues to be able to go through this. This demands
Bring
adaptivity.
the energy to the core.
Exactly. And that
As the
is
acceleration and the shifting advances, bring the energy to the core.
exactly right. That's the very
Yes.
best that we can do. And
As a
that's
species, as
yes.
an organism, as a one organism, human organism.
Well,
Yes.
and that's true on a planetary level just as much as
Yes.
it is on an individual level. When we take a look at the areas that are probably going to be most stable during a polar flip, it's not going to be the fucking poles because they're moving a lot. The
Yeah.
thing that is making the least amount of movement is right at the
The
center.
belt.
Yeah, which
The
you being
equatorial
only
belt.
6 degrees south, you're probably sitting in a decent location right now.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anyone's game at this point, as you and I both know,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think
exactly right.
I don't think anybody's immune,
No, I don't think anybody's immune either, but high mountain environment, not too far from equator, with a pretty perennial
season,
year-long season.
growing season. Yeah.
Yeah. It's different though now. You guys are experiencing, like you said, drought and fall season, and
I mean, some people on the climate science tip talk that it's the equatorial belt that will see the effect first. that it will happen from the belt outwards. So, I mean, it's really hard to say, honestly. And then who knows to what degree things, there's like, interference on a lot of different levels. It's just really, I don't know if we fully have enough data to understand and interpret what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, both the seasons in the area of the world where I grew up on the East Coast of the US, there's been less gradation of seasons over time. And the same here, even though we don't have 4 seasons in the Amazon, we have 2, we have a dry and a wet season. Still, the gradient of the seasons, we've lost that, even over the last 15 or 20 years, where there was like, a less intense hot season and a less intense rainy season, and just the temperate environment of the earth in general is starting to become more extreme, And so like that can have to do with like, the precession of the equinox. I mean, it can have a lot to do with a lot of different things. And so it's really, it's really hard to, and as you and I both know, I think as holistic clinicians, it's never about one variable. There's always a confluence of variables that create any situation. And that confluence of variables doesn't just occur physiologically or materially, it occurs on every level.
This was really cool. I've got to introduce you to this concept. You may have already heard it, but I was talking with my friend Sean Podrick, and we were at the Good Medicine Conference, and we were talking about root cause. And as when I think about the term of root cause, he's like, I actually have to think about the plants themselves. And it's very rare that I ever see any plant that just has a single root in the ground. It's usually multiple tendrils coming off of like a taproot.
That's a sage observation.
Yeah, and he starts calling it roots causes. We have to address the roots causes. And I think that that's brilliant because there's always multiple contributing factors to any condition or anything that we take a look at. So anyway, you said something that had reminded me of that, and I just wanted to say that same thing to you because I thought it's been a poignant thing that has helped to expand my mind just by saying we're going to get to the roots causes of things.
Yes. Just, I think having the aperture, and working diligently on expanding the aperture of what we consider and understand is going to be critical moving forward. That's going to be like a critical survival skill. If we, circling back around in the beginning of the conversation when we talk about like the art of thriving in the apocalypse, it's like, is there a formula to do this? No, I don't believe that there's any one formula. Just like there's no one formula to heal any specific thing, it's always going to be like this individual blueprint. And I think like as clinicians that operate from a holistic, expansive perspective, a hermetic perspective, I think guiding individuals in their healing process to try to find that blueprint for themselves and discover that blueprint is like the best way that we can be of service. But ultimately, like if there is an art form to thriving in the apocalypse, I think that there are certain ingredients to that formula, even though that formula is going to be individual for everyone. And those ingredients, those key ingredients are, as we've mentioned, adaptability, expansion, aperture, receptivity, flexibility, malleability, the ability to be able to consider various vantage points and viewpoints at the same, just having an adaptogenic being on every level.
Yeah, to draw it back to adaptogenesis, man. I think that's actually where it is.
Great name for a project or a company.
Adaptation. What'd you say?
It's a great name for a project or a company or a line or something. Adaptogenesis.
I know,
Good
totally.
one.
I know.
.com that.
Yeah, if you're starting that business, we each want 3%.
I got enough businesses going on currently.
I know, yeah. Seriously, I know. Same.
Right?
It's
Yeah,
like I
we're blessed.
I could
Very
stand
blessed.
to have fewer business, less business. So, well, we're pulling up
Thank you.
near the end of our conversation here, the end of the allotted time that I have for this today. What are some of your kind of closing thoughts on things? Any summaries, closing thoughts, or something to leave everybody with that will just completely melt the mind to shit?
I mean, I think like contemplating what we just spoke about, contemplating the art of thriving in the apocalypse is, food for thought for anyone that's listening to this. Let's see. Oh, I am, so like in terms of like adding to that, no, I really don't think there's anything to add to that. Because that's part of the key too, is that we're trained, like collectively, our belief system, we think that we keep having to add something, we have to find that new whatever. What if we were to shift that perspective to think that it's actually about subtracting and taking away? It's not about more, it's about less. Less really is more. And so having that spaciousness to contemplate what we've already put on the table is really important. And so, if there are people listening who are interested in the art of contemplation and philosophy, I had an opportunity lately to participate in the virtual New Hermopolis conference that's happening. I think you may know about this. This is something that our mutual friend Ike Baker is co-producing. And so I had an opportunity to participate in that, and that's upcoming. That actually hasn't happened yet. So I have a lecture on that forum, and it's called Perennial Philosophy Encoded in Stone, the Egyptian Temple as Learning Device. And so if there are people listening that are interested in philosophy and contemplation, especially from like a hermetic standpoint or philosophical position, that's a really great venue to tune into. And so basically what my lecture was all about, and this was a lot of fun preparing this, it was a lot of what we're talking about today, analyzing like the Hellenic fractal template of reality, and how the Egyptian temple was designed not as like a structure or a house of worship, but an actual learning or teaching device to teach that, to elucidate that. And so that's what the whole lecture is about. It was really fun putting that together.
Whoa, yeah, that sounds fun. Now, this interview, we're recording it right now. It probably won't be out for weeks or months. I think the New Hermopolis is going to offer a lot of these pre-recorded lectures, though,
I hope
as
so.
long-term things on their website.
I hope they evergreen it. Yeah, they definitely should.
I'll talk with Ike about that. I know
Okay.
he's got a lot of clout inside of there, so we'll see if we can make that definitely available. Well, Aubrey, this as always,
Always.
it's so refreshing and so fun chatting together. We could just.
Always.
I remember when I was
We'll have to
down
go camping
living with
next
you
time.
guys. It was just yeah. Seriously. So,
Totally, Fee, totally. I mean, you and Nori are welcome anytime. And, I'd love to come visit you guys once you guys get situated in your new place. And it's just always a pleasure for us to drop in and kind of align minds on certain topics. It's just so much fun. It's fun to expand, beyond the perimeters of what we've currently thought. And so I love being able to have, like erudite conversation with other expansive thinkers, and to show up and meet the moment from a place of receptivity where I'm there to listen and to laugh and to learn and to share and see what's shifted and changed on the other side of that conversation. I mean, like, that's really where I'm trying to operate from, is just to be as open to change and transformation as I possibly can.
yeah,
All
well,
the time.
you're
All
doing
the
a
time.
great job of it.
Thank you.
Doing a great job.
So
Speaking
are
of
you.
change and transformation, what are you doing now? I mean, you've had Sacred Motherhood Blueprint going on. You've had Alchemic Mystery Schools going on for a long time. You
A lot
have
of different hats,
Mama
Fee.
Sanctuary. I know you've got so many things. Now the question is, what's next for you? Where are you at with things?
Thank you.
Argos Destinations, right?
Correct. Yes, I'd love to share some links with people. So Argos Destinations is kind of a culmination of a lot of these different like corpi of work that I've been developing over time, in that it's a distillation of, over the last 20 years, what has been the most healing and the most impactful thing in my life that has enabled me to get from where I have come from to where I am currently at and where I am going. And that is being open and fortunate enough to receive a lot of transformational experiences. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that was the medicine. Beyond the diet, beyond the lifestyle, beyond the ceremonies, beyond the austerities and the trainings and all the exercise and all of that stuff, it was the medicine of experience itself. And so that's what I wanted to distill into this project, which is Argos Destinations, which is providing people with experiences where they can really meet the moment in an experience, in a container, in a place, in a location that is going to potentially like elicit something that can even change or reorient the directionality of their life. I know it's a tall order to fill, but like I feel fortunate that like my time here on this planet, like I get to challenge myself like that. You know, it's not just about clocking in, clocking out. It's about how can I show up, challenge myself to really be able to offer something. So that's what I'm currently doing. It's so like, and so essentially what is Argos Destinations is this really highly tailored, curated experiences that we put together. So we like, it's kind of like, I put my clinician experience into this. And so like, I'll get on a discovery call with people and like, I listen, I pulse take, I palpate, and I like really listen and try to understand like, what is it that this person is needing? You know, where are they coming from? Where do they want to go? How can I serve them and support them in this?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's fun.
It is really, yeah, I mean, well, and it is a big challenge too, because it's like you said, it's like using those clinician skills, but on an enormous kind of scaled up level for the individual on the level of experience.
Scaling is very interesting. Yeah, it's kind of what I've been working on a lot of levels, Fee, is like scaling my corpus, scaling my ability as an entrepreneur and what that looks like. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of hormesis happening in my career right now. So like it's a big project. We've had a very receptive response in our like first year out of the gate, and that's been wonderful. And it's also been like it's been intense. It's been a huge hustle. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm challenging myself, and I like to do that because that's where growth comes from.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
So fun. Well, this conversation has completely recharged my batteries.
Me too.
With all of the things that
Thank
have been going on with weather and people and the political situations and everything else. This has brought a lot of much needed levity and like reassurance and health and sanity back to my experience. So
Thank
as
you for
always,
saying
Aubrey,
that. May it be so for all who listen to it. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the platform. I absolutely adore everything that you do. Your entire corpus of work is just so on fire. And it's just, as you know, it's a joy to accompany you in this life and to know you.
Likewise, I feel that it does feel like mutual, Aubrey. Thank you so much.
I know. We're very lucky. Thank you, Phoenix.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to all of you who have listened to this interview. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, hit that notification button. You know, Aubrey and I have talked around. Well, actually, if I'm to be candid and honest, Aubrey has tried to talk me into doing some fun classes and things like this. We've tried to collaborate so many times in the past on doing certain things, and yeah, it can be a little.
Let's see it in the comment section if people would
That's what I
like
was
to
gonna
see.
say.
Yes.
If people want to see an event where either in Egypt we go and visit some of the sacred structures and learn about alchemy and astrotheology and
piezoacoustics and piezoelectricity, and like let's bring all these like pseudo-scientific cross-disciplinary fields together and see what happens when we put them in the alembic.
Yes, exactly. So there's some fun things that we could definitely do. But if you are interested in having either or both of us actually kind of work on a fun event that we travel to some fun destinations around the world and learn some very cool and relevant things that can help to just completely change our perspective of things, specifically with helping us connect with the stars around us, helping us connect back to our ancestors and ancestral knowledge, helping us connect with the mysteries of life, things like this, go ahead and drop a line in the comments. Let us know that, yeah, you would be interested. That will definitely help to gauge, for me particularly, how much effort I want to be able to put into it. Yeah, if it's something that a lot of folks are interested in, then I would say yes, let's definitely do this. But it's so hard to throw, and Aubrey knows this better than anybody. It's so hard to throw together an event for anything. It takes months and months and months and months of preparation to do it well and to be highly curated on the level that I feel comfortable putting my name on. And to do that for maybe there'll be enough people is a very huge gamble in life. So if you're interested, let us know. We'll make it happen, because these are interests that I definitely have that I want to do, but I want to make sure that there's enough folks on the receiving end that say, yeah, let's do it too. So anyway, there's all of that. Like that, be sure to let us know what you think about this episode. Share it with 1 to 3 people that you know will really enjoy it. And if they like it, give them the task of sharing it with between 1 to 3 people. Let's get some information out in the world, change our perspectives, and hopefully shoot towards a world of better hormetic and hermetic health and wellness. So again, thank
So
you
may
all.
it be.
Thank
Thank you,
you, Aubrey.
Phoenix. Thanks, everyone. Hope it was enjoyed.
Many blessings, y'all. We'll see you soon.